Wyndham Hotels and Resorts makes travel possible for all. Whether it's the long haulers looking for a great cup of coffee, a roomier rest for the on-a-whim road trippers, or a place to make summer memories with the whole family. No matter who you are, where you're going, or why, with 24 trusted brands to choose from like La Quinta, Days Inn, and Super 8, your Wyndham is waiting. Get the lowest price at WyndhamHotels.com. Restrictions apply. Visit website for more details.
This episode is brought to you by FX's Shogun, the official podcast. Each week, host Emily Yoshida is joined by the creators, cast, and crew in this exclusive companion podcast. They dive deep into the twists and turns of the plot, go behind the scenes, and explore the real-life history that informed the limited series based on James Clavell's best-selling novel. Search FX's Shogun wherever you listen to podcasts.
In 800 feet, turn right on Walana Street.
What?
Then turn
see
right.
If that's it's Jake.
Turn on.
This is Global Downlink.
Jake?
That's me.
Hey, Susan and I are both here. We're both in the car.
Perfect timing.
Do you know where we are?
Where?
We're in Manteca.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
What the hell?
I'm Susan Simpson.
And I'm Jacinda Davis.
I'm an attorney and investigator.
And I'm a true crime TV producer.
And this is Proof, Season 2, Murder at the Warehouse. Proof is a Red Marble Media production in association with Glassbox Media.
New episodes are released on Mondays, and on Thursdays you can catch our sidebar episodes where we talk about the case, talk to guests, and tell you more about what's going on behind the scenes. You can find additional materials about this case on our website at proofcrimepod.com.
This is Episode 8, Some Kind of Gothic Skater People. Last year, Jacinda and I made several trips to Manteca to investigate this case. And for some of them, Kevin joined us. We talked to a ton of people and learned a lot about what life was like in Manteca at the turn of the century.
I used to take off on my skateboard and I'd never have to ride it all the way across town because I'd always see somebody I knew and pick me up.
That's Jake's friend Lewis. From the way he describes it, back then, Manteca might as well have been Mayberry.
So you just caught rides everywhere?
Everywhere. And they'd just pull over. Need a ride?
So everyone just...
Everybody knew everybody. It was a small town for a long time.
The Manteca that Jake and Lewis grew up in is not the same Manteca that Jacinda and I saw when we went out there.
A lot different, huh?
And you can see the town. Yeah. It's a different place back then.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah.
Can you imagine if Jake got out now and he saw what Manteca looked like?
Yeah, you would trip.
Manteca has changed since the last time Jake saw it, but a lot of familiar faces are still there. On our first trip, one of the people we were really hoping to speak to was Matt Nozaki, or as most people seem to know him, Fuji. Fuji was the 17-year-old with a room in his parents' backyard. While living out on the streets, Jake and Renee spent a lot of nights crashing there. Fuji was never charged, but investigators believed Fuji had been a central figure in the Home Depot party.
All right, we just tried talking to Fuji. Well, we did talk to Fuji. He very quickly said he didn't want to talk about it, not interested. He didn't shut the door on us, though.
Yeah, but he didn't even want to hear what we were doing.
Good.
Don't want to hear, I'm good. No.
But he did give me his phone number, or what he said was his phone number, and said to try calling him tomorrow. Maybe he just needed a moment to process it and figure out what he wants to do.
Hopefully he'll change his mind and talk to us.
Yeah.
Based on Fuji's reaction to us, we hadn't been that optimistic. But the next day, Fuji met with us to talk. And eventually, he agreed to sit down with Kevin, Susan, and me for a recorded interview.
When we first came to your door,
What did you think when we knocked on your door?
Pretty annoyed.
Were you annoyed because we woke you up, or?
A little bit of both.
Is this a case that you like thinking about or talking about?
Not really. I went through quite a bit of hell for it. Being called a murderer and all sorts of messed up things.
And did people ever come up to you and say that they thought that you were involved?
I've had people kick me out of parties saying that I was involved with it, and you need to leave or we're gonna beat you up. I remember I was at a school and someone wrote Fuji is a murderer on the whiteboard. Everybody just laughed and teachers didn't even grill anybody to try to see who did it.
So how did that make you feel?
I just felt like no one believes me. No one believes what I'm fucking saying. Everybody's gonna believe shit from other people that know nothing about the case. And it was pretty tough. I was fucked up.
Well, thank you for being here. I know this isn't easy.
Yeah, no problem.
For a lot of reasons, Fuji does not like to talk about this case. He's not the only one. A lot of people don't like talking about it. This case, and the investigation into it, has caused a lot of hurt to a lot of people in Manteca. And you can understand why a lot of them may not want to talk about it now. But Fuji has been not talking about this case for a long time now. And not talking about it hasn't made the rumors go away. What changed your mind when we first knocked on your door? You were like, I'm not going to talk to you.
I guess help my friends with a little bit more closure. Stuff they don't want to ask me, but they're still curious about.
The stigma of this case has followed Fuji for decades now. But back when Fuji was 17 and being investigated as a murder suspect, it never occurred to him that he might be in any real danger.
It was a little bit intimidating, but I would say it was scary. I know I wasn't there, so I had nothing to hide, so I wasn't too worried.
But at the same time, they think that you were at a party where someone was raped and murdered.
But I wasn't there, so I wasn't too worried.
When we first met you, Jacinda and I both walked away thinking, he has no idea how close he came.
Yeah, I didn't know till you girls brought it up to me.
Like we've said before, Fuji was never charged. But investigators had very much believed he was involved in the murder conspiracy. And although they didn't charge him, the evidence they used at Jake's trial implicated both Jake and Fuji in Renee's rape and murder. In the end, it may have just been a lucky quirk of timing that saved Fuji. Because in Josh Burrows' very first statement about the Home Depot party, the one that led to the arrest of Jake and Ty and Ray, Josh had not directly implicated Fuji. The statements from witnesses implicating Fuji in the murder came months later, and maybe by then, it had seemed too late to arrest him too. Although Fuji decided he wanted to tell us his part of the story, he also said he didn't see much point in the investigation we were doing. Fuji told us he has no real opinion on Ty Lopes, because he knows nothing about him, but that he believes Jake is probably guilty. Once Jake was arrested and Ty was arrested, was your assumption that they were arrested because they found the evidence?
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. What would you have thought? I mean, we got him. Here are the suspects. Like, oh, they got him.
They have the
evidence. Look, that's scary. I used to hang out with one of those guys.
During that first trip to Manteca, we'd also wanted to speak with Renee's friends, but we didn't find them. They found us.
Okay. All right, so Susan, you just got a text. Hi, my name is Lori, and Renee was one of my best friends. I'm a little weary about talking about the case, but I am interested in what you know about it.
That night, after we first talked to Fuji, he'd been in a bar afterwards and was telling someone about these two ladies who'd shown up at his doorstep to talk to him for a podcast. By chance, Renee's friend Lori had been there and heard him. She had immediately gone into sleuth mode, trying to figure out who we were, what we were doing, and then called her friend Amber to tell her what was going on. Late that night, they sent us a message. Amber and Lori were unsure if talking to us was the right thing to do. They knew others might see their decision to speak with us as a sort of betrayal of their friend's memory. But they decided to talk with us anyway, because they had questions too.
But what do you guys feel? I mean, you've lived with this for a long time, and she was such a good friend, and knowing Jake is guilty, are you open to the possibility that maybe he's not? Or do you feel like justice was served?
I'm definitely open to what is the actual truth.
Being older now, and obviously there's possibilities that things weren't done correctly.
Renee's friends didn't know where any of this would be going, but if there was a chance our investigation might turn up some answers, they were in favor of it.
Please let us know when you're coming.
We will for sure.
Anything else you find. Thank you, guys.
We've told you all before about Rocket Money, a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings.
Well, one of our listeners signed up, and it turned out to be a great thing that she did, because she did have a service she was signed up for and forgotten about, pet insurance, which couldn't have been better timing because her dog, Whiskey, who is super cute and a retired sled dog, recently had a cancer diagnosis. But thanks to Rocket Money, she realized that she still had pet insurance that she'd forgotten she was paying for. And that'll go a long way towards helping Whiskey with those vet bills.
Usually, Rocket Money helps you save money by finding subscriptions you no longer want. But in this case, it helped this woman find a subscription that she needed and wanted. We're all rooting for Whiskey.
He's just so happy for Whiskey, he can't help it. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features.
Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/proof.
That's rocketmoney.com/proof. rocketmoney.com/proof. Hashtag Team Whiskey. You know that's the sound of another sale on your online Shopify store. But did you know Shopify powers selling in person too? That's right, Shopify is the sound of selling everywhere, online, in-store, on social media, and beyond.
Shopify Point of Sale is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person.
With Shopify, you can connect with customers in-line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond.
With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock.
Get hardware that fits your business and take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution.
Susan, what is POS?
It means point of sale, Jacinda, unlike you, who thinks it means something else.
Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify.
Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/prooftruecrime, all lowercase. That's prooftruecrime, all lowercase.
Go to shopify.com/prooftruecrime to take your retail business to the next level today.
Shopify.com/prooftruecrime.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
On our first trip to Manteca, the question we were probably most hoping to get answered was whether or not there'd been a party at Home Depot. Obviously, we had our doubts. But as far as we knew, we could show up in Manteca and have the first person we talked to tell us, "Oh yeah, I was at that party. It was a crazy night." So if there had been a party, who are the people who were likely to have been there?
And we've been trying to find the people who were at the party. Were you there?
No, I was not. I didn't know nothing about it.
That's Jake's friend, Chris. He and Jake hung out a lot in the months before Renee's disappearance.
Our friends are like really serious skateboarders. That's all we're doing, day and night skateboarding. It was like, we're always hanging out at Nate's house. Okay, go skate, hang out at Fuji's house, go to the park, hang out at parks all night, drink, pass out, get up.
This was Jake's usual routine, too. In fact, we know that during the week that Renee disappeared, on one of the nights that the prosecution said could have been the night of the Home Depot party, Jake and Chris had been partying together, but not at the Home Depot. They'd been on the other side of town.
We're at Library Park, and because we were like, it was during the summer, and we were all like, would just drink and crash at parks. I remember we were just wandering around kicking stuff and acting asses, and my night got cut short after I kicked the barbecue because the police came. And then, they made me get an ambulance because my leg was bleeding.
The police file does confirm that this night when Jake and Chris were together and Chris hurt his leg was during the week that Renee went missing. So yeah, Jake and Chris partied together a lot. And in a universe where there really had been a Home Depot party, Chris would have been top on the guest list.
If you'd been told that there's a party at the Home Depot, we're going to go drink there, you would have gone probably?
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
If Chris had been invited to a party at the Home Depot, he'd have been all in for it. But no one had invited him.
Kind of seems like the kind of people that like let me know too.
Is it strange to you that you weren't invited?
Yeah, usually we were almost every little party, so that's just kind of like, I didn't hear about it? Oh, okay. So maybe there was no party altogether.
That's what we've wondered.
We would have variations of this conversation a dozen times over while in Manteca. No one we spoke to who had heard the story about the Home Depot party had ever doubted it. But once they started talking to us about it, and hearing the names, according to Josh Burrows, of the people who'd supposedly been there, they'd conclude that none of this makes any sense at all.
Yeah, you know what? That would actually make a lot more sense if there wasn't a party.
We found no one who'd been at the party, and no one who knew anyone else who'd supposedly been at the party, aside from Jake and Renee themselves.
If there had been a party at this Home Depot, do you think you'd have ever heard about it?
Oh, hell yeah. I would have heard about it before anything, because either, oh, so-and-so was there, guess what they did, or, oh, I slept with, because I had some friends that were hoochies, so I always would have heard about it the next day, because I can guarantee you, and she would have hooked up with someone.
If the Home Depot party had been real, then speaking with Renee's and Jake's friends would have been all we needed to do to solve this case. They would have been the ones who had the answers we were looking for. But there was no Home Depot party, and the former teenagers from Renee's and Jake's circles never had the answers that we wanted. That's why, during that first trip to Manteca, Jacinda and I found ourselves heading south to Modesto in Stanislaus County. We were there to get some court records. Remember that website about the ghost sightings at the Home Depot and that anonymous comment someone had left about a serial sex offender who the commenter believed had killed Renee? A guy whose brother had supposedly owned the car wash near the Home Depot? Well, it turns out that sex offender was real. We'd found his name. To find him, all we'd had to do was track down every person who'd ever had an ownership interest in the car wash there, then internet stalk their family trees to find out the names of all their brothers, and then internet stalk all their brothers to look for one that's a serial sex offender. That car wash has had a fair few owners over the years, and those owners had quite a few brothers. But eventually, I came across the name of one former owner that seemed promising. Only it turned out he'd had 5 brothers in all, so I wrote down their names and started to check each one. I chose one brother at random to get started, and it turned out to be a lucky choice. One Google search was all it took for me to know that this was my guy. In 2008, he had abducted a 14-year-old girl, just like the anonymous user on the website had claimed. And that's why we were heading down to Modesto to see the court records from that case. So we went to the court in Modesto to try and pull the file.
They were very nice.
They were.
I was like, wow.
My favorite bureaucratic staff in California so far. And we were worried because we were told earlier when we called ahead that it could be 6 to 8 weeks before we could get any files.
She's copying them now. We can pick them up tomorrow.
Or this afternoon.
Yeah, which is sort of amazing.
So
hopefully we'll get more information.
We could be on the hunt again as soon as this evening.
Yeah. This could be a viable lead. Susan and I were thrilled that we got the records we needed so easily.
All right, Jared Daniel Conway. Okay, is it going?
Yep, testing.
Okay, so we just got the documents.
Make sure to hold it.
We just got the documents from the Stanislaus County Courthouse for the Jared Conway case.
We requested this morning, and they called and let us know they were ready already, so we came back.
Much better than the 6 to 8 weeks we were expecting or had resigned to.
Much better than, sorry, we lost the file that we're accustomed to.
So much better than that.
Jared Conway grew up in Modesto, California. He'd left the state for a time in the early 2000s, but in 2008, he came back to Modesto. An old friend offered to let Conway stay with him for a few weeks while he searched for his own place. That friend had a 14-year-old daughter. And on July 4th, 2008, Jared Conway abducted her.
All right, here's the 08 case. In the instant case, defendant, in the middle of the night, crept into the victim's bedroom, struck her on the head with a skateboard, and groped her breast.
With a skateboard.
He then rolled her into a blanket and carried her to the car. He bound her with duct tape, drove her to a second location, moved her to a different car inside a closed garage. He tried to rape her in the car, but couldn't. The fact that defendant did not consummate the rape or abandon his attempts does not preclude the fact that he harbored the required intent. I don't know, this is kind of eerie.
It is. It's interesting that he rolled her in a blanket.
I mean, there was that blanket with
There was a blanket in the Home Depot.
And he hit her with a skateboard?
Conway had blindfolded the girl, put her into his car, and taken her to an unknown location, where he moved her into a different car and kept her overnight. Then, early the next morning, he'd put her into the trunk of his car again and driven off. Earlier that morning, however, the girl's parents had noticed their daughter was gone and called 911. Police had responded quickly. And when someone spotted Conway's car at around 6 a.m., they'd given chase. The car had crashed. Conway tried to run, but he was apprehended. The victim, still in the trunk, was hurt. She was flown to a hospital with serious injuries, but survived. The case file we'd gotten from the court also contained a motion from Conway's defense attorney, seeking dismissal of the charge of kidnapping with intent to rape.
There's no evidence he kidnapped her with the intent to rape her. The victim was sleeping in her bedroom when she was awoken by someone choking her. The victim asked if defendant was going to rape her, and defendant said no. Defendant did not rape her. Defendant stated he had no intent to rape the victim. He did not kiss her, touch her vagina, or engage in any kind of oral sex, even though he had ample time to do whatever he wanted to her.
This defense, that Conway had never actually intended to rape his victim, hadn't worked. Conway ultimately pled no contest to the kidnapping with intent to rape charge. Because it was his third violent felony, under California's 3 strikes law, Conway faced a minimum of 25 years in prison before being eligible for parole. His first conviction had been in 1987 for the attempted rape of an 18-year-old.
Here's his past one. Okay. In 1987, defendant Conway broke into the confidential victim's home through the garage. He confronted her with a steak knife and rolling pin. He
He attacked her with both weapons and told her to suck his dick. Defendant disrobed. Victim got the knife away, at which time Defendant Conway fled in the nude. When arrested, Conway attempted to flee and struggled with police. The arresting officer lost part of his finger in the arrest. Excuse me, what?
How do you lose a finger?
In a fight with a nude man.
Conway served 2 years in prison before being released. A few years later, though, he was arrested again. This time, he received a 6-year sentence.
In 1991, Defendant Conway went to a neighboring apartment and knocked on the door. The victim had seen him in the complex for the past few days. Defendant visited for a few minutes, and when the victim requested they leave, he grabbed her, arms tightly, threw her on the couch, held her by the neck, and...
He held her by the neck?
Yeah. Held her by the neck and raped her. Additionally, while in custody, defendant has admitted to a 2007 out-of-state homicide involving yet another female victim. Nothing further.
Jared Conway's record showed he's been to prison 3 times for 3 separate attacks on women, in which he'd either raped or attempted to rape his victims. But in 2000, when Renee was killed, Conway had been out of prison and living in California somewhere. Additionally, while in jail for the 2008 kidnapping charge, he'd apparently confessed to murdering a woman somewhere outside of California.
Yeah, well. What do you think?
I think there's a lot of similarities, potential similarities, between that and what happened to Renee.
We now knew that the comment from the anonymous user had been about Jared Conway. But what we didn't know was why Jared Conway would be a suspect in Renee's murder. To figure that out, we'd have to find whoever it was that had written the comment, and we still had no idea who that was. But the case file from Stanislaus County had given us a few clues about where to start looking. Back in Manteca, one of the things we wanted to investigate was the skater gang that, according to prosecutor Charles Schultz, had been behind Renee's murder. A group called Grim Crew. According to the state's case at trial, it was Grim Crew that had helped Jake and Ty kill Renee. And it was Grim Crew who so terrified the witnesses in this case that many of them recanted on the witness stand. They'd recanted, the prosecution said, because Grim Crew would kill those who testified against them.
Oh, Grim Crew was trash. No one took them seriously.
What was Grim Crew?
It was like a group of kids that dressed like characters out of Slipknot.
Grim Crew was just this group of misfits that tried to skate and listen to punk rock music or whatever.
It was just some, like a kind of Gothic skater people.
Grim Crew was real. This wasn't a Freebirds situation, like in season 1 of Proof, where the gang behind the murder was imaginary. Grim Crew was actually a thing. And a few of the witnesses who testified at trial had in fact been members of Grim Crew. But the real Grim Crew was not the vicious skater gang that the jury heard about. Grim Crew was not vicious. They were not a gang. And according to Jake's friend Chris, they weren't even really skaters.
They were always hanging out at the skate park, but we just felt like, oh, these guys suck. They'd literally be in a circle, like off to the side of the skate park, just hanging out. Some had face paint on, and like super spiky hair and super heavy chains on, a lot of black. Everyone's wearing black, trench coats. Kind of made us look bad, you know? Because we were the skater kids that actually took it seriously. And we're like, nah, those aren't our friends, no.
Chris doesn't know it, but he's actually a member of Grim Crew too. Or at least, that's what the prosecutor told the jury at Jake's trial. Chris would have been offended by that if he'd known.
I don't remember any of their names, honestly. I just remember hanging out and drinking a few times. I think Jake was more associated with them than me.
Jake Silva was in Grim Crew, sort of. He was associated with them anyway.
The whole Grim Crew thing. Like skater style, but like Gothic at the same time.
I told Jake what people in Manteca had told us about Grim Crew and the reputation they'd had. Jake had been surprised and somewhat offended. No, we were the cool ones, he insisted. We were the edgy alternative ones.
We didn't need all the mainstream crap. We had our own little thing, you know? Spikes and black fingernails and leather.
Other members of Grim Crew that I spoke to tended to agree more with assessments of Chris and Fuji. I told one former member of Grim Crew what the prosecutor had said, about how Grim Crew ain't a bunch of Boy Scouts, they're a hardcore bunch of boys who are behind Renee's murder. He'd been shocked. But I was literally a Mormon Boy Scout, he told me, and there was nothing hardcore about us. And if I'm being honest, we were the guys no one else would hang out with, so we had to hang out with each other. And did Josh hang around the Grim Crew kids?
He kind of hung out with whoever would hang out with him.
Do you remember him ever telling tall tales?
All the time. He never knew what was true with him.
What kinds of things would he say?
Just anything to try to make himself sound cool. So some of it gets pretty bizarre.
And people tolerated him, or are they?
I mean, we did, but we'd often ditch him a lot of times.
Even among the misfits, Josh Burrows hadn't fit in. Was he ever Grim Crew?
He wasn't, no. He wanted to be. He wanted to hang out with people, but nobody wanted to hang out with him.
He was this little kid who wanted to be a gangster so bad, and all he did was lie to his friends to try to impress us.
Fuji had not been impressed by Josh Burrows' tall tales. But those tall tales ended up changing Fuji's entire life. Because there are a lot of people in town who, as a result of what Josh said, have always just kind of assumed that Fuji had some sort of involvement in this case, or at the very least, had helped in covering up the murder. Even some of Fuji's friends think that.
I don't think Fuji was involved. I just think that he knows things. And
like, what do you think he knows?
I think he knows what happened, like, truly. I think he knows what happened that night. I think he knows who's responsible 100%.
We heard this a few times while in Manteca.
I was kind of sad that she thought Fuji had maybe known something.
Yeah, that she thinks that Fuji knows more than he's admitting.
I think Fuji has probably lived a lot of his life now with people thinking that about him.
Yeah.
Fuji has had Josh Burrows' stories hanging over him for all of his adult life. But he'd never heard the stories for himself. All he knew of what Josh had said came from what the police had told him. We showed Fuji the tapes of Josh Burrows' interrogation for the first time.
You can hit pause whenever you want, or if you want to keep watching, that's fine.
It just pisses me off.
Hey, what's Fuji look like? He's kind of Chinese, he's kind of dark. He wears an orange hat a lot. Asian male, 17 with a shaved head. He wears glasses. Okay, that's all we'll have to make sure of.
You can hit pause, Fuji.
Was there anybody else?
A lunatic.
I mean, what he says, what he's talking about basically alters the course of your life.
Yeah. And it is just kind of being shoved in which direction to say. It's like he doesn't want to say me, but then they're making him, and he keeps changing.
And, I mean, in many ways, as you were telling me the other night, you feel like your life was stolen from you as well. And, I mean, how does it feel to see this for the first time?
I believe this idiot fucked my life up. I mean, it's too late to change it now, though.
In our investigation, we never found anything that would make us think that Fuji knows anything about Renee's murder. There's simply no truth to what Josh Burrows said about him.
Any hard feelings for Josh for putting you through this?
He's just a stupid kid at the time. I mean, of course, I was pissed at him. The way how many names he threw under the bus. Just making up random shit. But no, I don't have any hard feelings with him anymore. He was just a scared little kid who didn't know any better.
Some things in this case were easy to investigate. Had there been a party at Home Depot? No, there was not. Check that one off the list. Was Grim Crew a bunch of vicious killers? No, definitely not. Check that one off the list too. But there were other questions we had where making progress turned out to be a lot harder. Questions like, when was the last time that anyone ever actually saw Renee alive? Because although the last confirmed sighting of Renee that we have is from that morning at Labor Ready, there were a lot of people who told police they saw her after that too. Some of these supposed sightings of Renee were quite obviously wrong, and it didn't take much investigation to rule them out. But some of the sightings were harder to figure out. Take, for instance, Fuji's next-door neighbor, Amy.
And do you recall Renee and Jake?
Yes, very much so. First time I actually met them was at Fuji's house. I think they were just kind of couch hopping. I think they did stay a couple nights at Fuji's in the room.
Amy and Renee had not known each other well, but they'd hung out sometimes at Fuji's house in the weeks leading up to Renee's disappearance. And when we spoke to Amy, we told her that one of the things we were trying to figure out was exactly when that disappearance had happened.
Because the whole theory is that Jake and Ray are lying about last seeing her on the 29th, because people saw them together after.
Because isn't Jake still in prison, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, wouldn't those dates kind of be highly relevant?
Yeah, the date's a big deal. So these witnesses who saw Renee after the 29th were pretty important to the cops.
Okay,
And
yeah.
and you were one of them.
That saw Renee?
Mm-hmm.
About a month and a half after Renee's body was found, Amy was interviewed by detectives, and she told them she'd seen Renee, alive and well, on Thursday, June 1st. Amy told them this had happened around 3 p.m. While driving, she'd passed by Renee, who was walking down the street near a park. Amy had waved at her and kept on driving.
Did I really? I have no idea.
So you were one of the witnesses that was used to prove that she was still alive after the date that Jake and Ray claimed they'd lost her.
I'm feeling super nervous now because I don't even know. I don't remember any of that. I said I saw her at a park.
Mm-hmm.
Does it say what park?
Library Park.
Manteca Library Park down the street.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I don't know. I do not remember seeing her at all. But I mean, they very well could have because they did used to hang out at Manteca Library Park, so.
We showed Amy a copy of her police statements from back then, describing the sighting of Renee on June 1st.
Here, I'll let you.
June 1st would have been a Thursday.
Dude, that's crazy.
But the reason this matters is because if that happened, you'd be one of the last people to see her alive.
Oh my God, don't say that to me because I don't even remember her being at the park like that. That's just so weird. I didn't remember that at all.
If Amy really saw Renee on Thursday, June 1st, it'd be a huge deal. But after talking to Amy, we were confident that she had not seen Renee then. I think she probably saw Renee at some point, exactly the way she described it to detectives, but somehow back then, in telling them when this had happened, when Amy had driven by Renee at the park, the dates got confused. Because it doesn't make any sense that Amy could have seen Renee on June 1st. On June 1st, something else happened. Something Amy recalls clearly, even today.
So, and then when she went missing, her mom came over and she asked me if I had seen her. And at first it didn't dawn on me who the hell she was talking about. She was like, "Have you seen my daughter, Renee?" And I was like, Renee. I was like, "Oh, Renee and Jake, Renee?" She said, "I'm not talking about it. I don't give a shit where Jake is," or something like that. And I just said, "Oh, I was just asking if that's, that's your daughter." And her mom said, "Last time I seen her, she was over here at this kid's house," and she was pointing to Fuji's. And she said, "Are his parents home?" And I said, "Well, let me go see." And I said, "Hey, this is, Renee's mom."
Late afternoon on Thursday, June 1st, Donna Ramos went to Fuji's house looking for Renee.
When we got to Fuji's, we pulled up and there's like, "Where's Renee? When did you guys see her last?" And they just acted like, "We don't know. We haven't seen her."
This is why we're confident that Amy was mistaken when she told investigators it had been June 1st when she saw Renee. If Amy really had seen Renee at 3 p.m. that day, she would have told Donna that when Donna came looking for Renee just a few hours later. But Amy didn't say that. Amy told Donna that she hadn't seen Renee, that she had no idea where she was.
I think that if I would have seen her during that time that I was told that she was missing, then there probably would have been some type of a memory that I would have, said, hey, I did see her, but honestly, who knows?
We spoke to every witness we could find who reported they'd seen Renee at some point during the week after Memorial Day. For most of those witnesses, we walked away feeling confident that they had not seen Renee after Memorial Day, that they'd been mistaken about the date, and had actually seen her sometime during the week before her disappearance. We started thinking that Labor Ready really was the last time Renee was still alive, and that something had to have happened to her not long after she was there. Then we spoke to Aaron Zach Dew, and we were forced to reconsider the possibility that Renee really had been alive and walking freely around town after Memorial Day. In 2000, Aaron was dating the older sister of Renee's best friend, Amber. Amber and Renee would come to their house to hang out sometimes, and because of that, Aaron had gotten to know Renee pretty well. Shortly after Renee's body was found, Aaron contacted the police to tell them about the last time he saw her alive, on Thursday, June 1st.
They had asked me, well, when's the last time you seen her? And I was a few blocks from my house headed back home, and I remember seeing Renee walking down the sidewalk with her backpack on, but it didn't look like nothing was wrong. The detective said, you're the last person to have seen her. You're the very last person to see her, so you're automatically a suspect in that crime. Even though it was like 8:30 in the morning and I was headed home.
Aaron remembers feeling like the police thought he was a suspect, but the files we have don't indicate that detectives seriously believed he could have done this. But Aaron was important, because unlike the other witnesses who said they saw Renee after the 29th, Aaron had been able to pinpoint the exact day he'd driven past Renee on Yosemite Avenue. Because when Aaron saw Renee, he'd been driving back from Manteca Municipal Court, where he just had a traffic hearing.
I can't remember the specifics, because even then when I was getting questioned, I was like, oh, these dates, I don't know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you even tell the cops at one point, you're like, well, you're the one getting paid for this. Go find the court records and tell me what it was.
You know?
That's the only thing you'd say?
Oh, yeah.
The detectives did pull Aaron's court records, and they testified that they found out the hearing for Aaron's traffic infraction was held on Thursday, June 1st. This was big, because if Aaron saw Renee after that June 1st court date, then he was, in fact, the last known person to have seen Renee alive.
I was going in pretty skeptical of all of the post-Memorial Day sightings of Renee. But talking to Aaron, I did not doubt his story. What he said, what he remembered was clear. He had good reasons for remembering it. He had a good benchmark for why, because it was in the morning and he's driving back from court. He was certain of that.
Didn't we even say, well, that must have been a really quick,
court hearing, yeah. But Aaron Dew was the one person I believe thought might have a real memory of seeing her after.
Yep.
We believed Aaron. We could find no reason to disbelieve him. It seemed very likely that while driving back from court, he'd seen Renee walking down the street. And there was paperwork proving that the hearing had been on Thursday, June 1st. Which means maybe Renee really had still been alive, 3 days after her supposed disappearance. But if so, where had she been that whole time? If you're listening to this show, then I'm going to guess you're a fan of true crime podcasts. So in the mornings, grab your favorite mug and pour yourself a dose of spine-tingling true crime every AM with Morning Cup of Murder. It's a short daily show that's the perfect podcast to incorporate into your morning routine. In less than 15 minutes, you'll hear about a true crime that took place on today's date in history. Each day's dark history lesson will kickstart your morning with intriguing tales of murder, abduction, serial killers, cults, and more.
So, pour yourself a piping hot cup of murder every single morning with Morning Cup of Murder, Find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You might be surprised to know that not all serial killers are straight cisgender white men, and the victims of true crime are not a monolith either. She's Wendy and I'm Beth, and together we host Fruit Loops Serial Killers of Color, a true crime podcast.
Together we take deep dives into the true crime stories about marginalized and minoritized perps and victims that often go untold.
We also provide the context and nuance that these stories deserve. At Fruit Loops, we're serving up true crime with a side of history, society, culture, and some fun.
Listen to Fruit Loops Serial Killers of Color on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you want to know what it's like to hang out with MS-13 in El Salvador? How the Russian mafia fought battles all over Brooklyn in the 1990s?
Or what about that time I got lost in the Burmese jungle hunting the world's biggest meth lab? Or why the Japanese Yakuza have all those crazy dragon tattoos? I'm Sean Williams.
And I'm Danny Gold. And we're the hosts of the Underworld podcast. We're journalists that have traveled all over, reporting on dangerous people and places. And every week, we'll be bringing you a new story about organized crime from all over the world.
We know this stuff because we've been there, we've seen it, and we've got the near misses and embarrassing tales to go with it. We'll mix in reporting with our own experiences in the field, and we'll throw in some bad jokes while we're at it.
The Underworld podcast explores the criminal underworlds that affect all of our lives, whether we know it or not. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We don't know where exactly Renee was during the days following Memorial Day, if she was even still alive at all. There's one place, though, that we know Renee was not during that week, and that's with Jake. The prosecution's theory had been that after Memorial Day, Renee and Jake were still together for at least a few days more, until whenever the party at Home Depot had taken place, whenever that was. But Jake had spent that whole week doing the same things he always did, skating around town and hanging out with friends 24/7. There are at least 24 teenagers known to have hung out with Jake at some point during that week, and not one of them saw Renee with him during that time. The problem for Jake was trying to prove this at trial, because his friends were really, really bad at figuring out dates. In their endless cycle of skating and partying through the night, days of the week didn't mean too much. Do you remember now the last time you saw Renee?
Last time I saw Renee, probably either right over here in Lavelle Court by Tim's house or right over by Library Park. One of those two, I would say.
Do you remember when you first learned that Renee had gone missing?
I don't remember the dates, obviously.
Jake's friend Lewis was not alone in being unable to pinpoint dates. But what Jake's friends do remember is that there'd been a day when Jake started asking everyone he ran into if they'd seen Renee. What's the next thing you heard?
They came back asking if she had come by.
That day?
Yeah, because they guess they had left her at the Labor Ready.
Even if Jake's friends couldn't recall the actual dates of when things happened, it's still clear from context that none of them saw Jake and Renee together after the morning of the 29th. Jake first began asking his friends if they'd seen Renee on the afternoon after that trip to Labor Ready. And Jake's friends recall that after Jake started asking around for Renee, none of them ever saw her again. They saw Jake a lot, he was still around, but Renee had never been with him.
So during the time between when Renee went missing and her body was found, what were you and Jake doing?
Skateboarding and drinking and...
Just the usual routine?
Just the usual shit, you know, he wasn't so chipper.
If he did it, then he had no remorse whatsoever because we just got on normal life, skating, drinking.
Jake had been concerned by Renee's sudden absence, but his friends were not.
You know, I didn't think much about it. People take off for a couple days at a time. Wasn't a big deal.
They all assumed that Renee had finally decided to leave his ass and was off hanging out with her friends somewhere. And they told Jake as much whenever he brought it up. "You're worrying over nothing, man. She'll turn up in a few days, you'll see." They'd all been shocked when instead her body was found. Murders like that didn't happen in Manteca. And at first, Chris had not realized that his friend Jake was the number one suspect in the case.
Did you go to the funeral?
I did, yeah.
Did you go with Jake?
Yeah, and no one was very happy that he was here at all. It was just me, Lewis, and Jake, and we were like stuck at like sore thumbs there. People were kind of mad at me for going there with him, and I was just like, what's going on?
When Chris and Lewis showed up at Renee's funeral, standing by Jake's side, people had been upset with them and their display of support for an accused murderer. Lewis didn't care.
Did you ever think Jake did it?
No. So at her funeral, I was sitting next to him, and Chris, so it's three.
So at the funeral, did you know going in?
There's Tim. There's Liz. Where were we?
Now we're on again.
We're talking about the funeral. We talked to Chris, and it sounded like he didn't quite realize the dynamics at play till he got to the funeral. And
I knew what I was getting into.
So for you, it was a conscious stand. You'd be there with Jake.
Yeah. You know, obviously I still am.
There weren't many.
No. World's full of fake people.
In the 3 months that elapsed between Renee's death and his arrest for her murder, Jake Silva became even more of a nomad than he'd been before. He couldn't move back home, so he's pretty much drifting, lost through San Joaquin County, talking to whoever would still talk to him, taking shelter with whoever would offer it. One time, Amy told us, he stopped by her house, apparently hoping to hang out just like old times.
He came over and knocked on the door, and I was like, oh shit, and I was home by myself, and I was like, what do I do? You know, but again, back before all this, it was a normal thing. We would all hang out, smoke cigarettes, whatever. So I came out front just because I thought, well, maybe I could get some information, you know? And he was like, you don't think I did anything, do you? And I was just like, did what? You know, what are you talking about? But inside I was like, hell yes, you did. I know what you freaking did, you know? So, but anyways, he wound up just getting up and grabbing a skateboard and saying he'd talk to me later. That was it. And then later I find out that he got arrested.
One of the few people who'd initially not believed Jake was guilty was Dominic, another skater that Jake ran with sometimes. Dominic and Jake had not been especially close before all this, but when he saw what Jake was going through, with everyone accusing him of Renee's murder, Dominic had wanted to help.
We were just young guys, naive, lacked the skeptical gene. And I was like, well, you could stay with me, bro. And so he starts crashing at my house, and he's crying at night, and, you know, the whole sob story. I call my dad, and I tell my dad about it. And I said, but Dad, you know, he's crying. I remember it hit me like a ton of bricks. He said, you'd cry too if you killed your girlfriend. And like, oh, dang, right?
A lot of people we talked to told us how angry they'd been with Jake during this time, how they couldn't believe he was still hanging around town, trying to talk and hang out with people like normal, like he hadn't just murdered his girlfriend. Lewis and Jake were still hanging out, though, and one time, when they were just hanging out together, they'd caught a ride somewhere with Lewis's older brother, Tim Fisher. When we talked to Tim, he told us that when he realized who it was that his little brother had brought into his car, he'd been upset.
I'll never forget when I had Jacob in the car, and I just thought to myself, if I find out later this son of a bitch had something to do with that, and he was in frickin' arm reach of me, and I didn't try to rip his fucking eye out and make him swallow it, I'll regret that for the rest of my life. Because I looked at him, and I'll never forget this. I turned and looked right at him in the passenger seat. I'm a pretty good judge of character. And if he's a liar, he's really good. Look me right in the eyes. I swear to God, Tim, I had nothing to do with it. I had nothing to do with it, man.
And in that moment, you believed it.
Yeah. I looked at him and I go, fuck, I'm wondering who did then. I felt it was genuine because if not, I would have fucking pushed him out of the car.
Tim Fisher told us that in that moment, when Jake had denied any involvement in Renee's death, he'd believed Jake. He'd seemed sincere. Though Tim realized later, when Jake was arrested, that his normally good judgment must have been off this time, and Jake must have killed Renee after all.
He's in prison, so why? If they got some evidence, they don't just put people in prison that for that long for something like that didn't have something to do with it. My God, to think Jacob might be innocent after all these years is just incredible.
episode, you've heard some of our interview with Jake's friend Lewis. The first time we'd gone to knock on his door, though, he hadn't been home. But we left a card, and later that evening, he gave me a call. I am so glad to know that someone is finally looking into Jake's case, he told me. I'll do whatever I can to help you out. But due to his work schedule, we wouldn't be able to meet with him right away. The next day, Lewis called me again. Hey, you should call my mom, he said. She wants to talk to you. About what? I'd asked him. No idea, he told me. You'll have to find out from her. I'd been a little surprised. I couldn't imagine what Lewis's mother could possibly have to say to us, but if someone wants to talk to me about a case, I'm always happy to talk to them. So I gave her a call, and we set up a time for an interview. Here, all right.
Before we get started, can you just tell me your name, and we'll just make sure it's recording. You can check the
Victoria.
Lewis's mother, Victoria, told us that for years now, she'd been following Jake's case from a distance. And that, in case we needed it, she had something that could be important.
I was told that a lot of evidence disappeared.
Yeah, that's true.
Is it true? The panties, the sweatshirt, the blanket. Yeah, I'm really curious if there's any DNA still available, because the person I suspect, I almost totally know that did it. I have some of his DNA.
Next week, we have a very special episode for you. It's an update on Season 1 of Proof, and you'll hear from Lee and Josh and what they've been up to over the past year, after they were exonerated and Season 1 of Proof came to an end.
You've been listening to Proof, a podcast by Red Marble Media in association with Glassbox Media. We'll be back next week with episode 9. Send us your questions and comments at proofcrimepod@gmail.com. We'll respond during our bonus episodes, Proof Sidebar, on Thursdays. Kevin Fitzpatrick is our executive producer. Our webmaster is Clayton Brawley, and our theme music is by Ramiro Marquez. Audio production for this episode is by Michael Ulatowski. Our archivist is Amory Davis. And a special shout out to Justin Davis, who has driven all over California picking up files and documents for us. Lots of Davises, but for the record, we're not all related. Our social media manager is Skylar Park. And thank you to our sponsors who make this podcast possible. Check out the show notes for special sponsor deals. And follow us everywhere with the handle @ProofCrimePod and on our website, proofcrimepod.com.
And lastly, a note to our listeners. If you have any information related to this case, we'd love to speak to you, no matter how small a detail it may seem. It just might be more important than you realize. You can reach us by email or leave us a voicemail at 929-267-3172.
That's all for this week. Thanks so much for listening.